Convention will please be in order. Future historians will record the names of the 4 greatest presidents that our country has ever produced. There are tremendous memorials in existence to 3 of them today. One is George Washington. One is Thomas Jefferson. One is Abraham Lincoln. And the friend of the steelworkers, the man who loves the American people and the poor and oppressed of all the world, will be the 4th of that tremendous quartet in the immemorial times ahead. He is, of course, President Harry S. Truman.
I'd like very much to listen to that all afternoon. I say I'd like to listen to that all afternoon. I love it. But I've got another date and I've got to get back to it. And I want to tell you something here that I think you'll like. My good friend, I say that my good friend, the president of the steelworkers. I never was as happy in my life except one night in 1948 when the thing happened to this fellow right here. You've always been my friends, and I've tried my damnedest to be yours sometimes. Maybe I haven't succeeded. You know, friendship doesn't consist of lip service. It consists of action. And when a man is your friend, then you're in trouble. You can find out for sure whether he's been giving you lip service or not, and I tried not to give you any, although I scolded you once in a while. One of the nicest things about this present job of mine, and in fact I haven't got a job, I'm practically on relief, but it's all right. The reason that I say that is because I've had on my own conditions to tell people exactly what the facts were as regarded the time when I served you as President of the United States. I had the satisfaction at noon today of telling all the editors and publishers that run the meanest press in the United States exactly what I thought of them, and they had to stay and listen to it. They had to sit there and take it because they couldn't get out. But tell you right down in their hearts, I think they liked it. I don't think there's any argument about that. And as I came in here, everybody kept telling me to give them hell, Harry. Well, you know, that's quite a reputation, but you know, I never gave anybody hell. I just told the truth on them and they thought it was hell. One of those nice things about this present so-called job of mine is, and as being a former president, is that I try pretty much to do as I please. And that is, I don't have much luck at it, but I do have a good time trying to do it. And I want to say to you that I highly appreciate this, Mr. President. It's a pleasure indeed to me to be able to wear that. You know, I've got more cards to more organizations, I guess, than any man maybe in this room. And I'm prouder of those that have been presented to me by my real friends, like you people, than any others that I hold. I have many pleasant things to do, and I can go around the country and visit my old friends, and that's what I'm doing today. Visiting old friends, the United Steelworkers of America. I never had better friends. I've got a soft spot in my heart for the steelworkers, partly because I remember how things used to be in steel before there was a union. And partly because the Steelworkers Union, from its first days, has been an honest, responsible union, the kind that an American can be proud of. That's the reason I like it. I'm happy to have your friendship. You've always been friendly to me when I needed friends. And I remember that. And I believe you know that I never forget my friends. And then there's some personal considerations. I have a soft spot in my heart for Phil Murray, who was a great man, and for his able and distinguished successor here, Dave McDonald. I told you a while ago, I don't think he was any happier than I was when he gave them the licking the other day that they deserved. There are some pleasures in being a former president, and as I say, this situation is certainly one of them. But there are also some burdens. And one of the greatest of these, I can tell you, is knowing from experience what this country should be doing and then seeing that it is not done year after year. Having been president, I'm reluctant to criticize the occupant of that office. In fact, I try to support him whenever my conscience will let me. And I've got a touchy Baptist conscience. I know what his troubles are, and I know that the occupant of the White House cannot make everything come out right 100% of the time. And I know very well that what he does or does not do may depend upon the information not available to the... So I try to be not too critical of what happens from day to day, although I'm trying now to instruct the country what they have had and what they brought on themselves when they voted for a halo. I had the satisfaction of telling the farmers out in Omaha the other day just exactly what they got, and that they deserved it because they brought it on themselves. And of course, I cannot help being aware of the general trend of events. I cannot help but see the condition of this country and the world. And what I see stirs me up, and I just can't keep quiet. I'm at heart a senator, as you know, and no senator can have a muzzle put on him unless somebody holds his hand over his mouth. Indeed, I don't think I ought to keep quiet, at least not now. We've come to the time in this election year when there is an opportunity to do something to improve the situation. I think we ought to do something about it. And I'm going to tell you some of the reasons why I feel that way. And it's not a personal proposition with me. It's because I think more of the country than I do of myself or anything else in the world. Here we are, in the midst of a gigantic worldwide struggle to preserve a place upon this planet for free government, for individual liberty, and for human dignity. Here we are faced with the imperative need to use all our strength and resources for this great task. And what do? For some reason that I can't understand, we spend most of our time imposing handicaps upon ourselves. Take steel, for example. You men make steel, then you know how important it is. Steel is a prime element in economic power and in military power. And we ought to be using it to the uttermost for both purposes. We're engaged in the toughest competition for strength in the world that the world has ever seen. The Russian Khrushchev has publicly declared that the Russian communists are engaged in an economic war with us. We must make sure we win that struggle. And steel is one of the main items we must have for that purpose. That's what's happening. The Russians are catching up with us. Not merely because they are moving ahead, but also because we are moving backward. Back in 1950, we produced almost 100 million tons of steel, and the Russians only produced 30 million tons. In the 8 years that have passed since then, the Russians have almost doubled their production. During 1958, they will produce approximately 60 million tons of steel. And what about us? It's now estimated that the United States will produce 82 million tons of steel this year instead of the 100 million tons of steel we produced in 1958 years ago. Thus, in only 8 years, we've slipped back from a position of having more than 3 times the steel production of the Russians to a point where we are barely 20 million tons ahead of them. You know what they do with their steel? They don't make things for the welfare and benefit of their people. They don't make automobiles for public consumption. They don't make the washing machines and things of that sort, and air conditioners and things of that kind for the welfare and benefit of their people. They spend most of their steel on heavy industry to make weapons which they hope they can beat us with. Now, the decline in our production of steel is not because we don't have the capacity to produce it. Oh, no. Our steel mills can produce far more than 100 million tons a year. I've been told that if necessary, they could produce 160 million tons of steel if they have the demand for it. During most of this year, the steel industry has operated at little more than 50% of its capacity. And now everybody is raising a great hullabaloo and proclaiming the end of the recession because steel has finally climbed until it is operating at more than 60% of capacity. Isn't that a hell of a raise? Think of it. Nearly 40% of the strength of a basic industry like steel goes to waste if we use 1950 as a criterion by which to go. And people telling us the recession is over. Well, the 5 million men who are still unemployed don't think the recession is over, and I don't either, if you want to know what I think. You know, I've heard somewhere, I think it was in Washington the last time I was there, that a recession, as a definition, is when your neighbor loses his job, and a depression is when you lose yours. Your people know something about what it's like to be laid off and be out of a job. It's a shameful situation. Our Army and Navy and Air Force all need much more modern equipment, and they need steel to help provide it. This unused capacity in the steel industry ought to be used for that purpose. The unemployed workers in the steel industry ought to be put to work for that purpose. Furthermore, the same kind of situation exists in other industries, and it's fantastic. These industries ought to be producing full blast for the strength of this greatest republic in the history of the world and the greatest nation in which a man can live. Now, why has this come about? Why are these industries producing so far below capacity? It's because the Republicans in Washington are following economic policies designed to prevent full production. They are trying to turn the clock back to McKinley's and Mark Hanna's time, and they've started out to be almost successful. Maybe we put them out before they get it done. They've done this deliberately. They plan to slow down business activity and to create a little unemployment. You know, the Republicans attacked the New Deal and the Fair Deal because we were planners. They are planners too. The difference is they plan for high interest rates and recessions, and we plan for growth and prosperity. They want a little unemployment. So they say it keeps labor in its place. They want to hold wages down. They think it makes prices higher. They don't like strong labor unions because strong labor unions mean higher wages. They don't come out and say all these things publicly, but they say them privately. And then they act to put them into effect. That's what big business wants. So this is what the Republican politicians in Washington do. The big fellows have been running the government since January the 20th, 1953, and I told you birds exactly what would happen, and yet look what happened. When the Republicans took control of the government in 1953, it wasn't 6 months before they began raising interest rates. This may mean fat profits for the big banks, but it certainly is hard on the working man who's trying to buy a house, a car, or a washing machine. The next thing they did was to start packing the National Labor Relations Board with anti-labor members. You people know far too well how the board's been chipping away at your rights by administrative decisions. Another thing that's hurt you is what they have done to the farmers. The Republicans had no sooner come into office in 1953 than they began to drive farm prices down. Farm prices and farm income have been going down ever since. The real income of farmers since 1952, their purchasing power has fallen 24%. That means less demand for steel, for plows, for tractors, for combines. And that in turn means fewer jobs and smaller wages for the men who work in the steel mills. Makes a complete Republican economic picture. Republicans are creating a situation on purpose. They will try to sweet-talk you and fool you and pretend they are really friends of labor. I think you were told that yesterday. But it's not what they say to you that counts, it's what they do to you. What they've done to you is aplenty, and they're still at it. Take the story of the Kennedy-Ives bill in this last session of Congress. This bill grew out of investigations of the McDonald Committee in the Senate, which showed that some reforms were needed to keep corruption out of this labor movement. And I offered those reforms way back yonder when I was asking you to vote for an amendment to the Taft-Hartley Act, and you voted for Taft.
Yeah.
These investigations also show that the vast majority of the union officials are decent, honest, honorable men, and I know them, and I know that's a fact. And they're good citizens. And every one of you agreed that whatever crooks there were ought to be cleaned out. You agreed to that yourselves, of course, without any forced action. As a matter of fact, the cleaning up that has been done so far has been done by the labor movement itself, and it's certainly not by the self-righteous Republican politicians. You know that. I'll tell you about it. Well, a bill to bring about the necessary reforms under the federal law was introduced and considered in the Senate. And the Senate finally passed it by a vote of 88-1. It must have been a good bill to get the Senate that near unanimous in agreement. Now, I've been in the Senate, and I know how they act, and when they vote 88-1 for a bill, it must be a pretty good bill. As this bill went over to the House of Representatives from the Senate, and then the strangest thing I ever heard of happened. The National Association of Manufacturers and the Chamber of Commerce, your friends and mine, began to lobby against the bill. You see, it wasn't mean enough and tough enough against labor to suit them. Besides, it required employers to do a few things. And here's what they thought. Who did this Congress think it was, passing laws that imposed obligations on the company as well as on the union? That's the way they always feel. The big business lobby had its results. The White House, which had been clamoring for a reform bill, became strangely silent. The Secretary of Labor, who happened to be in Europe, began sending messages back home, and this is why I think he's your friend, that this bill was full of all kinds of curious defects. Finally, the bill came to a vote in the House of Representatives. Most of the Republicans in the House, 77% of them, voted against it, and thus managed to kill it. The truth of the matter is that the Republicans didn't want a bill to pass. They wanted to keep the issue alive. They wanted an excuse to keep on attacking labor unions. To top it all off, they wanted to put the blame on the Democratic Congress for a failure to pass a labor reform bill. But they were not going to be able to do it as long as I live. This Republican maneuver is political hypocrisy at its worst. And we're not going to let them get away with it. The blame for killing this bill belongs squarely at the doorstep of the Republican Party, and that's where we're going to keep it. I'm going to put that baby in their lap before I get through going around this country. Let there be no mistake about it. 77% of the Republicans in the House of Representatives voted to protect the gangsters and the racketeers and corruption in labor unions, and there isn't enough to put in your eye. You fellas have about cleaned it up, and you keep it up and clean it up. And then let's get the necessary legislation to keep the thing straight. And it's easy enough, and it doesn't cause any harm to the honest leaders like this one here. Now, they were encouraged to vote that way by the Eisenhower, Nixon, Mitchell administration. Now, tell me what's happened to the morals of the Great Crusade. I wonder where it went. I think maybe it went to New Hampshire. My friends, this is really a very serious business. It is said that labor is at the crossroads because of the very serious attacks being made upon it. I think maybe that might be true. But America also is at a crossroads because of the worldwide threat of communist aggression. Neither of them, neither the working men and women nor America as a whole, can afford this kind of political skullduggery. We cannot afford the attempts to discredit the trade union movement in an effort to manufacture political issues, and that's exactly what they're doing. We can't afford to have the trade union movement destroyed because its preservation is essential to the strength and welfare of this great nation. We cannot afford for men and machines to be kept idle as a part of an effort to hold wages down and keep labor in its place. For the sake of America, we cannot afford anything less than full production, full use of our resources to build our national strength. That's what I told those birds this morning. I don't think they believed me, but I gave it to them, both barrels. Now the question is, how are we going to get this done? I think we're going to get it done by electing more Democrats to office, and that's the only way to get it done. That's why I'm going about the country this fall, making speeches and telling people what the facts are. I want you to help me. I want you to go home and work as you've never worked before for the election of people who are your real friends and my friends and the friends of all Americans. I wouldn't have to be doing this if these people had done the duty by the people of this nation. One of the compensations for my having to do it is being here today with you. And I'm not kidding you at all. People who will understand and appreciate and listen and study the facts, we'll have no difficulty in finding out what's best for the nation, and that's what I'm interested in. I'm going to spend the rest of my life lecturing to youngsters and telling them what they have in the nature of the greatest republic in the history of the world. I'm trying to inform them just exactly what the presidency means, what the Congress means, and what the courts mean. And I'm going to give it to them in language that they can understand. It won't be any political economist lecture, I can tell you that. It'll be a series of lectures to these youngsters on the basis and from the experience of a man who's been in politics from precinct to president and who has spent the best 10 years of his life on the farm, 10 years in the Senate, 10 years running a county government, and 8 years in the White House, where I tried my best to work for the welfare of all the people and for the peace of the world. All of you will go home and study the facts and study the issues and cast your vote for the welfare and benefit of the country, and send the members to Congress, enough of them, to keep this country in the groove for the welfare of all the people and not just for a few who don't need any help. Thank you very much.
The President would like to shake hands with everybody here. That's impossible, so let me shake hands with him for all of you. Mr. President. The President is returning to New York, where he's going to have dinner with his wife and his grandson. And of course his daughter and son-in-law, I presume. So he has to leave immediately. But I just want to say this, and I think I speak the wishes of all of the steel workers, not only the delegates, but the overwhelming majority of the steel workers. If we had the power to do so, Harry S. Truman, we would draft you as a Democratic candidate for the presidency. Jacob.